Hey everyone, we are so excited about today's episode. We started our Faith Unshaken blog and this Truth Talk podcast to help challenge and encourage other believers in their walk with the Lord by sharing our life journey and experience.
As we were talking about this week's episode, we realized that you guys didn't know anything about us. So we're going to give you an insider's look into our lives today. Just a reminder, this is still new to us. We're still learning, so please bear with us for the ums and ahs and any mess-ups we do.
All right, let's get to it. Hold on tight. This could be a wild ride. Welcome to this episode of Truth Talk.
Today we'll be doing a Q&A session. Let's start with something easy since I get to go first. So, Angela, what are some of your pet peeves?
Well, they are some of the things that you do best.
Ooh, please tell me.
Whistling and snapping, and extra annoying if you do both at the same time.
I can do that. Should we have a demonstration?
If you must. Oh, goodness. See? Yeah.
Greatest thing ever.
So what are your pet peeves?
Slamming doors drive me crazy, which is interesting since we have a 13-year-old daughter. She knows that really pushes my buttons. So I think sometimes it's done on purpose, but other times when she's mad, I think she's figured out that it's going to get her grounded.
All right, next question. What is something you're afraid of?
Well, that one's easy. I hate snakes. I've tried facing my fear. I've held them. I've touched them. It doesn't matter. One surprises me. If I'm outside, one surprises me. I can beat Superman in a jump over a building. Leap it in a single bound.
So isn't it true that because of this fear, you once pushed your wife and baby into the path of an oncoming water snake to save yourself?
Absolutely not. That is a complete fabricated lie. I pushed my wife and daughter out of the way of a water snake. Okay, so here's the story. We're out swimming. We're in this lake. I'm a little bit above my waist, deep in it. Angela and our daughter, who was a baby at the time, were on a floaty. I was pushing them around, having the good old family time. I look over to my left, and I see this water snake head up out of water. Must have been doing 100 miles an hour straight at us. So I very rationally shoved the floaty and my wife and daughter as hard as I could. Then, in order to save
Towards
them,
the snake.
No, away from the snake. If it's coming at us from this direction, I shove you this way. See, that's away. And then I turn around and try to lure the snake away by yelling and screaming in a very high-pitched voice and flailing and splashing a bunch as I jettisoned out of the water.
That's a good word.
I was almost on par with Jesus there for a moment.
Walking on water.
I almost walked on water that day. So
We remember that a little differently, but we'll just leave it at that.
well, that's okay. Well, since you're enjoying this so much, why don't you share something that scares you then?
Well, my fear is totally rational. Moths are blood-sucking and vicious. And it's totally reasonable to try to jump out of a moving vehicle when one is dive bombing your head.
Okay, now let's set the scene for this one. Just leaving our house on the main road, driving. I'm probably doing 30 to 40 miles an hour at this point. And my wife starts flailing and screaming about hitting me numerous times as I'm driving, causing me to have a heart attack and wet my pants because I think something horrendous has happened.
It was horrendous.
And here is this tiny,
tiny.
smaller than a quarter moth in the car.
Attacking me.
Yeah. So
I had to jump out.
pulled over. She jumps out. The moth just happily flies out because it has no idea what's going on. Yeah. So
It's totally reasonable.
I may have tried to sacrifice.
I was in danger.
You can claim I tried to sacrifice you to a snake, but you tried to kill the whole family.
No, I was just trying to jump out of the vehicle.
Yeah. And cause me to wreck. Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
All right. Well, now that we've had some fun, let's get a little bit more real here.
Okay.
And so, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your family growing up?
Sure. I grew up in a Christian home in a small Southern Oregon town, very little. We went to church and were involved in community. I went to school out there and everything. I had 3 siblings. So I had an older brother and an older sister and my younger brother. My dad worked outside the home. My mom did daycare. And so I had lots of built-in playmates during my growing up years, which was a lot of fun. My older siblings are much older because I am very young. And so they must be much older than me.
Well, I can vouch for that. I mean, we are the same age, and I've met them numerous times, obviously. So, yes, they're much older than us.
They're senior citizens.
Yes, seniors, yes. They're almost ready for that discount.
My younger brother was born when I was 5. He was born with a disability. He had cerebral palsy and Dandy-Walker syndrome, which meant that he couldn't see, he couldn't speak, didn't have any way to communicate. He was in a wheelchair and was totally dependent for all of his care.
So, having a brother with special needs like that, how do you think that affected you growing up?
Well, there were difficult times. I mean, it was hard. It changed kind of our family dynamic and things. He had a lot of orthopedic problems, and so a lot of summers we would spend up in the northern part of the state at a children's hospital where he would have surgeries. We would have to be there for several weeks usually. But that experience in the hospital with him, seeing how the nurses interacted and took care of him and how they helped my parents, supported us as a family and how they were, so nice to me. That kind of sparked an interest in me to want to become a nurse, which I eventually did. And so I think that kind of started that whole path for me. Overall, what Aaron taught us was unconditional love and acceptance. And he showed us that different is not bad, it's beautiful. And even though he couldn't speak, he was able to communicate his love for us. And he would have the biggest smile and he would laugh when we'd, talk to him or tickle him. He knew mom and dad's voices and brothers and sisters' voices. And, he knew who we were, and he had special smiles and his little giggles and stuff for us. You also have a special needs brother. Tell us about your family growing up and how that was for you.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a small little town in Oregon here that's about 750 people at the time when I was growing up. There again, I grew up in a Christian home also. I was the oldest of 3 siblings, 3 brothers. We were all born about 2.5 years apart. So like you, my youngest brother was 5 when he was born. And he was born with Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And then he also was born with a heart murmur, a hole in his heart. And so at 4 months old, he had open heart surgery. Let's see, Dad did a lot of the work back then growing up. So, and he was a logger. He worked away from home a lot of times. And then Mom, she was a homemaker growing up, and made sure that us kids were doing what we were supposed to. And
with 3 boys, that might have been a challenge.
Paddling our behinds if we needed it. So when I was about 10, Caleb about died, my youngest brother. And we were all playing outside, and we used it was an old country crock butter tub. That was the dog water dish. And Caleb was on the front porch right outside the front door playing out there, and me, my middle brother, and a cousin that's about our age, we were running around in and out of the house. And as I was sprinting into the house, Caleb was there, and something looked off, and I stopped, and I turned around and went back. And best we can figure is he was trying to act like the dog and drink water out of the bowl. Yeah. And well, when he got his face down in it, being the plastic, it suction cupped up around his face, so he couldn't breathe. So when I found him, he was slumped over. This thing sucked to his face. I couldn't get it off. So I yelled for my mom. She came running out. She got it off. And so thankfully, even back then in the 80s, I know we're old, that we received great training from when I was in school. And so I went and called 911 like I was taught to do.
Good.
And the fire department came and they evaluated him and took him into the hospital. And so all that really built up for me having a very the protector attitude of wanting to protect my brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd pick on them, but nobody else better mess with them.
Yeah.
Well, that takes us through our childhood. Now, I've heard some rumors, maybe once or twice, from your side of the family of that your teen years might have been a little crazy. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, sure. Love to. So growing up, I was pretty sheltered, I think. Like I said, I lived in this small community. We attended church out there. I went to school there, knew a lot of the families. Everybody was kind of from the same background, had the same values. So I was pretty naive. Didn't know much about how the world worked and that kind of thing. So when I started high school, I started seeing and hearing things that were a lot different than what I had heard growing up and was raised believing. But everybody seemed to be having so much fun. So I just jumped on the bandwagon with all of that. So I had a lot of partying and lying and sneaking out and lots of boys. And so that all led to I got pregnant when I was 16. So.
Okay. So getting pregnant at 16, I can imagine that was, kind of a difficult time and stuff. You were pretty young. So why don't you tell us some more about that?
Yeah, I ended up getting married. I wanted the perfect little family. So I ended up getting married, moved out. We moved into this little apartment. That was quite the shock, being on my own. I had always, been at my parents' house, and my mom was home with us. And so I always had her, and we were really close. And so being without her and, being on my own and having to figure out how to work a stove and how to make dinner and how to, go to the laundromat and do your laundry and all of these things, pay bills.
So it wasn't the Disney story fairy tale?
No.
No. Oh,
it was quite the shock. I went into it being in some kind of a delusion, that we would have this perfect little family and live happily ever after. But that delusion, soon was replaced by the reality that I'm going to be a mom. And I say that my son saved me because knowing that he was growing inside me really made me examine and look at everything I believed in. And I realized that I did believe that Jesus died for me. And I wanted that personal relationship with him. Because I had always believed in God, but it was just something that we did as a family. I don't think my faith was really my own until that point. I went to church, did all the things at church. That's just how it was. I had a lot of knowledge, like, in my head and knew all the right answers from, Sunday school and all of that. But I didn't really know Jesus as my personal savior until then. So becoming a mom was the wake-up call I needed to start my faith journey with the Lord.
Oh, that makes sense.
Well, that was a lot. So now that I've bared my soul, why don't you tell us about your teen years?
Well, I was a perfect angel as a teen. Oh, okay. No, I mean, I guess for my area, I was a pretty typical teenager. Yeah. Played sports, football, basketball. Unfortunately, I got into wanting to be like our dads and other people, and so started chewing and smoking and drinking, and that of course led to lying and sneaking around. And so, Mom, I'm sorry, the camping trips were not camping trips with all my friends. They were I guess there was camping there, we were sleeping out there, but there was also the fire and the beer and the cigarettes and everything with it. At 17, I ended up joining the Oregon Army National Guard, which was good for me. Mm-hmm. That was probably kept me out of a lot of trouble because I had some responsibilities there that I had to be held accountable for. So it kept me from doing a lot of things that I probably would have regretted later. And then I left that summer in between my junior and senior year and went to Georgia that summer for 8 weeks and did basic training. And then I came back and went into my senior year. Senior year was great. Problem was it was too great. And so I was more interested in my friendships and hanging out with friends and going and doing stuff than I was doing my schoolwork. So unfortunately, it came, I don't know, month and a half or so before graduation, and I got called in and told I was a couple of credits shy from graduating. So I promptly went and signed up and started getting my test for my GED.
Okay.
That takes us both, I guess, through the high school years. What did the next chapter look like for you?
Well, I'm married. I have a son. When he was 2, I had my second son. So when I was 19, I had 2 boys. In my marriage, there was always conflict there. We wanted different things at that point. After about 7 years of marriage, my now ex-husband left for the last time. At that point, I was done. Up until then, I wanted to make it work. It broke my heart that it wasn't going to work. A lot of it, I think, was because I didn't want to show failure, or, I was still holding on to the dream of the perfect family. And so having that not happen, I think was hard. But at that point, when he left for the last time, I was done. I was ready to move on and build a life with my boys. So I was going to school and working part-time, raising the boys on my own. So that was a pretty busy, crazy time for me.
Not just going to school, you were getting pretty good grades in school, weren't you?
Yeah, straight A's for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was going on with you during that time?
I left just a couple weeks after high school ended and went to advanced individual training for the Army, AIT. Another summer in Georgia. Came back, promptly went and got a job. And my first job I landed was logging, so I was a logger, setting chokers and high lead logging. And then started dating a girl that I grew up with, had known most of my life, and we ended up getting married a week before I turned 20. And then, it was a lot of ups and downs in my marriage. We both came from Christian backgrounds, but we were both very immature. And then a couple years into it, I got deployed with the military and went overseas, and I was in country, out of this country, and in another country for 6 months. And during that time, things really kind of fell apart. So I came back home from my deployment and to a broken marriage, and then got home, and the military, my unit, called me and said, "Hey, we have this other assignment that's in this other town in Oregon. And would you be interested in that? It'll be for about a 2-year duration." And I immediately said yes. I didn't want to deal with what was going on, so I ran away. So I took that assignment, and it ended up deteriorating to where that we totally split up, and it eventually led to a divorce.
So how did that time during the separation and the divorce process, how are you dealing with that or coping with that?
I didn't deal or cope with it very well. I got mad at God that he let my marriage fall apart. So I was acting like the teenager that's throwing a fit. And then, I had a lot of hurt and shame for letting my marriage fall apart. My response to everything was to kind of go crazy. And so there was a lot of drinking and partying, a lot of girls, a lot of just sinful behavior that I'm not proud of now. So, but God had bigger plans for me. And so through all that, I may have been mad at him, but he never forgot
never
or left me.
Yeah.
He was just sitting there waiting for me to come back.
Yeah.
And so in summer 2003, we were both newly single, and something pretty amazing happened. At least I thought so.
That's right. My knight in shining armor, my best friend and protector and hero, swept me off my feet.
Have I met him?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
No, but when we met, we had an instant connection.
Yes.
You knew that. We would spend hours on the phone, like 3 or 4 hours a night.
And that should tell her a lot, because I don't like to talk on the phone, which she knows now. But yeah, then I would spend hours with her.
Mm-hmm. We would discuss lots of things. Lots of deep discussions about relationships and God and faith and kids and families and all of those things. We discovered that we had a lot in common. Just weird things, like our high school mascots were both the same. Our younger brothers, both 5 years younger, both disabled. What else? There was other stuff, but yeah. Anyways,
Grown up Christian.
Yeah, just a lot of similarities, a lot of things that was really, really funny. But I think at that point we both knew what we didn't want out of relationship, and we had both had the failure of marriages and the hurt that goes along with that, and so I think we knew kind of what we didn't want, and we were trying to discover how to be different and how to have a different type of relationship. But during that time, I freaked out. I wasn't ready for a big commitment, so I quit taking your calls.
So by quit taking my calls, she means she ghosted me. I would call, and she would either have her sister answer the phone or act like she wasn't there. And I was kind of stubborn. I wasn't stupid. I realized what was going on, but it irritated me. So I would call once or twice a week just to say, hey, what's going on? And so she finally answered one time and said, yeah, I just can't do this right now. And so I said, okay, not a problem. Thanks for letting me know. And then I ended up erasing her number out of my phone. And so it was yeah.
And then I called you out of the blue.
Called me out of the blue and wanted to get together. And so it took me completely by surprise. Mm-hmm. It was a good thing, though.
Yeah. We had our second first date.
We went on our second first date. And so that was
all she wrote. We dove in head first from there.
Yeah, I dove in off the top diving board head first. So
I do have a question, though. Who said I love you first?
It must have been you. I didn't say it first.
Okay, you didn't say it. You wrote it.
On what? I didn't write it on anything. You would have kept it if I'd have wrote it on something.
He was holding my hand in the truck on the way back from out of town, and he wrote, I love you on the palm of my hand. And I said, what? And you said...
You
said, I wrote, I like you.
What? No, I would... oh, yeah, I think I vaguely remember this. Yeah.
Yes,
and
it was very sweet.
Yeah, if it would have happened, then yes, I would have definitely done that, because we hadn't been together very long. And I would have, if it would have happened, then it would have been because I didn't even realize I was doing that until I did it. And it would have freaked me out big time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it did.
So I'm glad I didn't do something like that.
Yeah,
so
it was very cute.
So sweet and cheesy.
It was very sweet. So we were dating. Things were getting pretty serious. I was at a pretty good place with the Lord with my walk. You and I talked about faith a lot, but I think you still had a lot to work through with God. I ended up inviting you to church, and you had kind of a sleepless night that night before. Is that right?
Yes, I definitely had a coming to Jesus moment there, literally. So throughout my first marriage, I had started to build a relationship with God, and being discipled, was plugged into a good church. But then when everything fell apart and I got mad and threw my little temper tantrum, then I hadn't been to church in almost 2 years at that point. And so, but I knew what a relationship with God and Jesus was and what it's supposed to be. And so I wasn't willing to just show up with you and fake it. I had all this knowledge. I, there again, knew all the right answers. I knew what things were supposed to be. I had just chosen to willfully not do it.
Right.
So I wasn't willing to be a hypocrite like that and to just show up and fake it.
Yeah.
So I spent most of that night praying and talking to God, reading my Bible until, well, I mean, to be honest, God was always there waiting for me. And in the end, that's the feeling I had of essentially what took you so long. I've been here,
Right.
I've been waiting, and so, but I had to get there to make sure that I felt right before going. So I think I got a couple hours sleep and then got up the next morning and went to church and walked in the wrong door. And the first person I met was the pastor. So I was like, oh, okay, this is.
And I had been going to that church for years and years. And so the people there had seen me through a lot, and the boys and the divorce and everything. So I think they were all pretty much like family. So walking in there was probably pretty intimidating, but
yes, I can remember the look on Pastor Dave's face when, oh, you were invited. Who invited you? And I said, Angela. And he goes, Angela? And I said, yeah. And he like, oh, I didn't know she was, I could tell he didn't know she was dating somebody.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So thankfully that worked out.
Yeah.
I didn't get kicked out of the church. So, but yeah, it was a whirlwind romance, We definitely didn't waste any time.
No.
So we ended up getting married in 2004. So we didn't date, quite a year. And then, I became an instant dad, made a lot of mistakes. I just had a lot to learn in that whole thing.
Yeah.
But I will say, you said, how getting pregnant saved you, getting in a relationship with you, but becoming a dad though to both boys instantly kind of helped save me too, because it made an impact that now I'm responsible for not just an adult, but I got little people that are looking and watching everything I do.
Yeah.
And so I actually took that very seriously.
You did.
I messed it up plenty too, but we did have the infertility issues. It took us 5 years of dealing with that until we had our daughter.
Yeah.
And then when we did have her, she was born 10 weeks premature, and you had preeclampsia and almost died from it. So that was, probably to this day, the scariest day of my life. And I just, I remember calling one of my best friends and breaking down crying, calling my dad and mom and breaking down crying, and well, I'm a big softie now. I'll cry all the time, but back then I didn't cry.
No.
Yeah. So, it was one of the scariest times of my life. And, but it really taught me to lean into God and trust him, and he'll see us through. And he did. He provided resources and money and just things we didn't expect, blessings throughout the whole thing that we could have never anticipated.
That's right.
And so the only answer to that is God taking care of us. So, and thankfully now we have a healthy 13-year-old daughter that's beautiful.
Yes.
Inside and out, and can still get on our nerves because she's a teenager. But love her to death.
And when she was about 2 or 3, we started talking about having another child, but didn't want a repeat of that pregnancy and delivery experience and the infertility issues as well. So
I couldn't have handled that again.
We looked into adoption. So we spent about 2 years in the process of all the paperwork and home visits and home studies and getting matched and all of that. And we brought our little girl, our youngest daughter, home from China in 2015. She was 5 when we brought her home.
Yes.
She has done amazingly well. It hasn't been perfect by any means, but she bonded from the beginning. We never had any attachment issues with her, which is amazing because a lot of times with the older kiddos, they can have a hard time with attachment. But we were mom and dad from the beginning.
Yeah, it's been a complete blessing. I couldn't. There again, God's
hand was
handiwork
over it all.
Over
Absolutely,
everything.
yeah. And so now she's our daughter through and through. She is 11, and she is our active sports playing girl. We chauffeur her all around to her events and games and everything. Never stops moving.
Yeah.
If she stops moving, she falls asleep.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd have to say for the most part we had a normal marriage, fairly normal anyway. There was the stress of our careers and parenting and daily life.
Right.
But behind closed doors, mental illness and addiction nearly cost us our relationship.
That's right. On the outside, we showed everyone that we were the typical Christian family. We had a lot going on in our hearts that we didn't communicate, we didn't resolve. And so that deep connection that we had that we talked about through the dating years and everything, that kind of seemed to have faded into just kind of coexisting together in the house.
Yeah.
I felt totally unseen and unknown at that point.
Just a lot of non-communication,
right?
And so, because we danced that dance for a lot of years while raising our kids, and we had a lot of good times
for sure.
But by us not addressing the issues that were coming up, by not communicating, we just continued to drift apart. So
yeah. So during that time, and just feeling that our relationship was disconnected, I didn't really feel close to God. My default is to isolate and withdraw when I'm stressed or feel hurt, and so I kind of did that with everybody, and God included. But then in my heart, I started to have this deep longing to have deeper relationships with God and with the people in my life. So I don't know what shifted in my heart, but I made a conscious decision that I was going to invest in my relationships, and I wasn't going to be satisfied with the superficial anymore. I started being intentional about the time that I spent with the Lord and with you and the kids, and with other people that I shared my life with. I started having real conversations, digging into the Bible, spending time in the Word and spending dedicated time in prayer. And through all that, my spirit came alive like it had never been before.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how that can happen. Yeah. See, for me, the real turning point's when you discovered my pornographic addiction. And, I almost lost my marriage. I broke your heart. It was very hard, but then it was also a good thing because I'd been hiding this stuff, and I'd been feeling for years that God wanted to use me for some type of ministry, but something was always holding me back. And so when everything came to light, I was able to finally confess it, bring it to the light, and then start the process of recovery. And then you were able to start the process of healing from that. And God's been able to use me now more than I could ever imagine. And opportunities and things he keeps putting in front of me are just astound me and scare me a lot of times. But it's just very wonderful, also. So, there's good and bad, so.
And so through all of that, and we're still walking the journey. It's not done. We're still healing together and restoring relationships and trust. But through all of the things that we've been through, infertility and our daughter being born and being really sick and in the hospital for 7 weeks, and the addiction and betrayal, through all of that.
Mental health.
We have learned that God doesn't waste our pain, and that our desire is to use the pain that we've experienced and the lessons we've learned along the way to bring glory to God. So we would not be where we are at today without the love and grace and forgiveness that God has given us.
Oh, absolutely. We believe that today there are a lot of Christians out there that are tiptoeing in the shallow end of Christianity in their faith, and that their marriages are getting distant and cold, and they're missing opportunities to connect with their children.
Mm-hmm.
All this is happening while they're trying to portray this perfect image of the perfect life of marriage. And we understand that. That was us for a lot of years. And it's our desire to move out of the shallow and superficial and into the richness of connections with each other and with God. And so that we can know and be known.
That's right. We know there are others out there that are going through the same things. That is why we started our blog, Faith Unshaken, and why we started this podcast, Truth Talk. We are committed to sharing our journey with you. We will discuss topics from a biblical perspective and from our lived experience so that you can be encouraged, renewed, and equipped to live out the purpose and plan that God has for you.
Thanks for being with us today. And we hope as we shared our stories, you're able to see that we're just ordinary people and that God is a mighty God that's done extraordinary things in our lives.
Yeah.
We hope you'll be back. Don't forget to like and share. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. Until next time, keep smiling.